Andy Clarke, appreciate you coming down, my man.
No problem. This is
the den.
This is quite the podcast cave you've got here, isn't it? No, it's good. It's really good.
I've hid the alcohol. I don't know why, but it's here somewhere, as you can probably see to your side. But yeah, it's a decent little spot for people to come and have a little chit chat.
Yeah, it is. Hackney Wicks. It's funny, on the way down here, I was thinking that almost exactly 10 years ago, I was coming down here pretty much every day, working for OBS, going down to the Olympic Park.
Okay, yes.
Because that would be my route in. I'd get off at Hackney Wick and then I would walk into basically the back of the Olympic Park. It's changed so much in that 10 years now.
It's difficult to explain to people. Like, even go back a bit further, like 15 years. So there's no Olympic Stadium, there's no Westfield, there's no... It's difficult me trying to explain to people what this area looked like. And I try and tell them it was just one big... sort of not wasteland, but it was almost industrial. It wasn't this.
Yeah, it kind of was, wasn't it? I've been in London for 22 years now, and this was, and you still see a bit of it if you go down to Canning Town and places like that. You still see kind of like that wide open space where there just isn't much.
Nothing.
I mean, they're filling it in with flats pretty much now,
especially in Canning Town.
Yeah, but that kind of that area and just kind of over the other side of the river and the canal and stuff. It's because my wife's from Poplar. Yeah, and. Around there, it's that hasn't really been overtaken by the city in the same way that other bits have. It's
strange that Plaistow a bit like that as well.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Plaistow. My mum lives in Plaistow, and I go there, and there's a couple of new builds, but it's almost stopped at Stratford. It's like, okay, we're not going to go any further. Yeah. It's weird how it's just come this way: Dalston, Hackney, Stratford, or E20, as they like to try and separate E15 and E20. Yeah. But very hipster around there now. The price has gone up of everything.
I can imagine. Yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah, but it's good to have you, Andy. I always say that you are Mr. Boxing. I always say it to you every time. Every time we speak, I'm like no one knows more boxing than Andy Clarke. Just because there's people like myself that know, a bit of professional boxing, but you cover all of that, and then you touch onto the amateurs as well, and not just like the Olympics and the World Champs where everyone kind of knows a bit about, but you go deeper than that, which I find super impressive. Don't know how you do it.
Well, it's kind of luck in a way because I get asked to go and cover tournaments and I would watch them probably. Yeah. I do watch them when they're streamed, but not from beginning to end. Yeah. And I started doing that in about 2014, 2015. And then there was a bit of a hiatus 2018, 19 where World Series boxing stopped, which was an unbelievable competition.
How good was that, by the way?
So good. So good. We kind of knew that it didn't add up at all in terms of finances. You've got these fight nights going on everywhere and they weren't publicised and no one knew anything about it and there's nobody
big
there.
Purses.
And all of that. So it didn't really make sense. But that came to an end and I had all sorts of problems. So the last thing they were thinking about was providing commentary on their tournaments. But then when the new regime came in at the start of last year, I dropped them a line and me and Big Ron McIntosh and
who's, by the way, who's like you. Like the same. You guys are exactly the same in terms
of
I
mean,
knowledge.
he's been doing it even longer. I mean, he went to his first World Championships, Amateur World Championships in 2001. So he really is the man when it comes to that kind of encyclopedia of knowledge. But they've asked us to do quite a lot of stuff over the last year. European Juniors, Men's Worlds, Women's Worlds, World Youth. It's great. It's absolutely great. The way the world is at the minute, it's being affected by the Russia-Ukraine war because they're Russians who are in charge of IBA, sponsored by Gazprom, and therefore it's kind of
boxing come out of that region as well.
Yeah, and so it's tailed off in recent times, but you understand why.
Yeah, of course.
So you can't, when you're freelancing, you always have to.
Yeah, you can't moan. There's a war going on. I can't one second. I need to get paid.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you laugh, doesn't it? Well, makes you laugh probably isn't quite the right phrase, but you afford yourself a wry grin when you think about the last couple of years and the kinds of things that have affected your work, pandemic, and then a European war kind of has a direct effect on what I may or may not do. Then there's other things.
It's crazy when you think the world
US Treasury sanctions.
Anything,
there's all sorts.
Honestly, people are like bloody driving stolen motorway because of petrol prices. There's so much craziness going on. Take me back a few years. How'd you get into this? A lot of people always reach out to me, and I'm quite new to this industry. You've obviously been doing it a lot longer than I have. How'd you get into it, and why'd you get into it?
So I left university in '99, and at that point, it was still pretty normal not to really have any kind of plan. So when I was at university, I mean, it's a long time ago now, and it was free, you know, so you didn't come out of it saddled with a load of debt and immediately need to get a job to kind of service that. You didn't need to do that. I was in a very fortunate position where, you know, my parents were always going to support me chasing a bit of a dream job if I wanted to, which is a definite privilege in itself, because not many people can say that. And I think they were a little bit, I think they were kind of curious as to what it was I was going to do. My dad's he's retired now, he was a barrister then, he was a judge. And he always thought that kind of thing would suit me, but never really pushed me. And because it's funny how families work. He's from a totally different background to me and my brother, and he's a working class guy from sort of that hinterland between Manchester and Liverpool, Runcorn around there, basically. And there was nothing there really. So him achieving what he achieved from where he was from was just kind of unthinkable, really.
Yes, doesn't happen.
And whereas me and my brother are kind of like, you know, we're middle class kids, and the world is kind so oyster, you know, you're white middle class, we were privately educated, you know, there's infinite possibilities basically that just weren't there for him. So I think, you know, and my mum's the same, and so that made it fine for us to. My brother works in Westminster, he works in the House of Lords. It made it fine for us to gamble. Because we knew that if it didn't work out, we'd be all right.
Yeah, you've got something to fall back on.
There you go. There you go. And that's, like I say, I've never.
That's interesting for you
lost
to even
sight
admit
of that.
A lot of people wouldn't.
No, you have to, because it's not. You know, you hear these stories from people sometimes, you know, about foundation myths about companies and entrepreneurs, and they say, "Oh, well, I did this and I did it by myself," and you think, bullshit. Nobody does it by themselves. And then it turns out that actually they had like $1 million loan from their dad to
there's a
start
big
their
trust
company.
fund that no one wants to mention.
Think, like, there's nothing wrong with that, but just be honest about it. You know, because it's not helpful for people who actually are starting out by themselves.
Agreed.
If they look around and just think, oh, well, they're all doing it and they had it tough like me, because it's just, what's that about? You know, if you're going to try and if you're just going to lie basically about the circumstances in which you know,
that's
were
why I
allowed
always feel
to
like
kind
it's important to share your stories.
Yeah.
So people can understand that, okay, he got into it and that was his path, and I've been open about my story and it's that path. So whoever's coming from whoever route can realise, okay, there is a path regardless.
Yeah. And so anyway, when I left, I loved sport, played it from, you know, the age of as soon as I could walk, obsessed with it really. My brother was the same, he's 2 years older. My dad did kind of like introduce us to it, but we immediately loved it. So it was just an obvious thing to keep doing. So when I thought about what am I going to do for a job, I did just look at sports broadcasting, sports journalism, and just think, okay, well, people do this.
Yeah.
You know, it's not undoable because people do it. And I honestly think then the routine was probably easier than it is now.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so, because I came in through radio, and then there were loads of stations that carried their own sport. And it's just a great route in, because you get into a place every day and you learn a lot of stuff, and you've got editors and program controllers showing you how to do things and telling you whether something is good or whether it's bad. Now I do think it's harder, because you can set up your own thing, but you don't really have anyone to tell you anything.
No.
Or show you anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of throwing it at the wall and see if it sticks.
Yeah, exactly. So I wrote a load of letters basically, and I got replies from Capital, and I'd moved down to London. I was temping, and got one from TalkSport.
Oh, really? Okay.
And 2 or 3 others actually. Yeah. But I went into Capital for a few weeks on a Saturday, and then I was going to start. You know, they were happy to throw you in. I was going to start going to games for them, and then I went in to see TalkSport. And they just relaunched from Talk Radio to TalkSport, and they were kind of taking people off the street almost, to be honest with you, in terms of like runners and people at my level. Yeah. You know, if you had a reasonable CV and you're enthusiastic and you were able to say yes, I'll start on Monday, they'll give you a crack, and that's how it happened. I went in to see Mike Parry for a pretty bewildering kind of, I guess it was a job interview, and I started the next week kind of on expenses. I just took it from there, and it was a great place to be, because you got to do things much more quickly there than you would anywhere else. And really, what you needed to do in the early stages it was just all about enthusiasm. You just had to be up for it. You just had to, do you want to cover this?
I still think that applies now.
Overnight shift. Yeah, I do as well.
That applies now. I think a lot of people.
You put your hand up and
I'll
say
I'll do
yes.
it. Yeah. Well, I'll go. I'll try. I'll whatever. Yeah. I'm like, it's quite similar, but obviously very different. But I went to TalkSport as well. Still, obviously still there. And same thing. They chucked me random sports that I would never dream. Like, obviously, I'm there for football and boxing. That's what I know. I don't know anything else. And what about netball? I was like, I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
I was like, you know about cricket? Not really, but I can research for a couple of hours.
Yeah, it's a job, isn't it? Mm. Yeah, and I think that's another difference, which is that when I was there, I started going to games quite quickly, but you had people to show you things. So like the senior reporters there, like Dom McGuinness, who you know probably.
Yeah, love Dom.
Great guy. John Driscoll, Macca, Andrew McKenna, they were all there. Adrian Durham was there.
Macca's fantastic.
Yeah, and they were all really, really great from the point of view of me just saying, this is what I want to do. How do I go about it? And they said, right, well, come to a press conference with me, come to a game with me. And then when I started going to games, I would get kind of like, Adrian would kind of like critique me every week, in a good way.
Yeah.
Because he wanted me to do well.
That's it.
And so you've got that feedback there. You've got that, sounding board of people showing you how to, showing you how to do things basically, and telling you if it was good or bad. Shit. And a lot of people don't really, they don't have that, and it does make things a lot more difficult, I think, if you don't. Because otherwise, you just go down the route then of deciding that what people say on Twitter is real life, and you decide for yourself how good you are at something.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's not really going to work, is it?
No, it's not. It's not. And you're right. You do get. We'll touch on social media because I know you're not the biggest fan of it. If I could delete it, I would. But I use it for a purpose, and there are some good of it, but I still think majority of it's just nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very useful. Life. Yeah, it's very useful as a news feed to follow what's going on.
Yeah. As soon as I see someone trending, I'm like, are they dead or something happened?
Yeah.
And then most times something's just happened. How did that switch from football to boxing? Where did that come from?
So my kind of main sports when I was growing up were football, boxing, and cricket. Okay. I was obsessed with cricket. That was probably my first one that I was really, just all over 24 hours a day. But TalkSport was just predominantly football, basically.
Yeah, it still is.
It still is. And that's why I 80-90% of what I got asked to do there was football. And so I rolled with that. I did as much boxing as I could. Was always suggesting things, but they weren't really interested, basically.
Yeah, doesn't bring in the numbers.
No, exactly. They weren't really interested. So I just continued doing football, and then for about 10 years basically there, and went to like everything, World Cups, Euros.
Really?
Every final.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I went to the Euros in 2004 as a roving reporter, which was brilliant.
Yeah.
Don McGuinness was the England reporter, and I kind of picked up the other stuff. Yeah, it was great. Okay. It was so good. I was there for a month. I loved every second of it.
Yeah.
Then in 2006, I went to the World Cup as England reporter, which again was just a brilliant thing to have done. And I was absolutely gutted when they got knocked out because you just didn't want to go home because it was so great. Yeah. But really, I decided that I wanted to do commentary on football, and they just weren't really interested at TalkSport, which is a bit disappointing. So I kind of segued from radio into TV and started doing football for Sky. And then once I started doing that, I just thought, well, I always really wanted to do boxing. Now might be the right time to try it. And an old mate of mine from TalkSport called Dave Finch was in the boxing department at Sky. And so once I'd done one season of football, I got in touch with him, and he said, okay, I'll see what they say. And it was at exactly the time that Box Nation had started. So John Rawling had gone from Sky to Box Nation. Yeah. And they kind of needed another person every now and again to do some commentary. So,
well, and you were that confident, because you make it sound like that's quite an easy jump. You were that confident to go from football commentary to boxing commentary.
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't something I took lightly, because what I knew that they would know was that having done like 10 or 15 games of Football First in a season and stuff like that, they wouldn't be worried about my level of experience or broadcasting skills, the boxing department. They would just be, all right, well, you can obviously do that, or they wouldn't have. Yeah. The boxing knowledge side of it, I thought was good enough, and I quickly realised wasn't actually once I started. But I no one had to say anything. Yeah. They're all very polite. Yeah. I knew. It wasn't because of anything I'd said, but I just looking at the people around me and listening to conversations, I thought, right, I've got some work to do here.
Okay.
So,
Is that more on just the knowledge about the boxers, or just sort of boxing terms?
Well, it was more just the knowledge of the industry and how everything works, and how matches are made, and why would they fight him and not him, and politics and all that kind of stuff. And once you kind of, I'm not sure you ever get to the bottom of it, but once you understand it to a degree, everything else all of a sudden makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? It makes a lot more sense.
I think that's the hardest thing to try and explain to a casual boxing fan. As they continually ask me, why is AJ not fighting Tyson Fury? I'm like, well, where do we start? And it's like, you got to understand what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty, I think, in introducing new people to boxing. They won't get it. They won't quite get why Boxer A is not fighting Boxer B, why Errol Spence hasn't fought Terence Crawford yet. And it's difficult to explain why that hasn't happened.
It is difficult. And you're also fighting against this nostalgic view that back in the day, everything was amazing and the best still fought the best, which isn't true. Even when there was one title. When there was just one title, you had all sorts of people getting involved. The mafia were quite heavily involved. Post-war for a good spell. People could hold the title to ransom and fight endless non-title fights, and they'd draw the colour line not that long ago and refuse to fight black fighters. You could always come up with a reason why you could avoid fighting somebody if you wanted to. So it's no different to now, really, in a lot of ways. I think it's almost better now, because with 4 belts, maybe you don't need 4, but with a number of belts, there are more opportunities for fighters to win a world title and make some money. Because previously, if you got frozen out, then you're done. You were done.
You're done. And I always say that. And look, not to disrespect Adam Cattrall and Nick Peake, but the bin the belts thing. I'm like, I get it, because you want to see one champion, but understand that belt generates a lot of income for that fighter, and that's what we're in it for, really, isn't it? It's such a dangerous sport, in it to make a bit of money. Some can become world champions, most won't, but just to make a bit of money. And sometimes they even have an A belt, which might not be the best belt in the division, but it opens a few doors. And broadcasters love a belt. They love a fight when there's a belt on the line, and I get that. Although I understand as well why that's difficult for some fans to understand who the number one in the division is if everyone's walking into the ring with a belt. Who was your favourite boxer growing up?
Eubank. Eubank. The first.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Eubank over Benn.
Yeah, I like Benn too. Yeah. I wasn't Eubank or Benn for me, and I think a lot of people like that, and I think that's quite a good example of how things are different now, because everything's very binary now. Either you're for something or you're against it.
What if you're
either someone's good or they're shit.
You match him or you're DAZN.
There you go. Exactly.
Sky or DAZN. You can't.
Whereas then, I don't think it was like that. I think people, you just find yourself just a little bit more drawn to Eubank, and that was, and the reason I was just because of just his personality and how
fantastic,
just off the reservation he's always been.
He's incredible.
Just amazing. I've never seen anyone like that before or since. And I still, when I see him around now, get a bit starstruck by him, because he's always, I was going to say he's in character, but that's not fair. He just is who he is 24 hours a day. And it takes a while to kind of accept that
that's him.
When he goes home, he takes the monocle out, puts the cane down. That says, "Oh God, you know what? It's hard work being Chris Eubank."
He can't do that. I love to.
But
that's just who he is.
But it's not that. It's not that. And so I loved him, and that would have been 12, 13 when that all really started, and it went on for a while as well. You know, Collins comes along, and obviously it's Michael Watson and McClellan, and it was just brilliant.
That was, for me, that's what drew me to it as well. Obviously some people would say Tyson, and obviously I remember Tyson, but I remember the fights in 86, 80, I was far too young. So the 90s over here, and that's probably why I love domestic fights more so than some of the big international ones, because I've been brought up on those big domestic ones. Obviously, you say of Eubank, Watson, Nassim Hamed, later on Joe Calzaghe. It's just floodgates of those British fights. And that was it for me. Eubank, Benn, and that era, and that rematch at Old Trafford. I could watch 100 times. The fight even wasn't that great, but just the build-up and the walk to the ring. Take my money now.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's great. Me and Matt Macklin did during lockdown or COVID or one of the themes we came up with was kind of like deep dives into big fights. Everyone was doing the same thing. It's not an original thing to do, but we got Bunsey on, I'm pretty sure, to talk about Benn Eubank, and so I went back. So I went back and watched it, And you just think, wow, ITV had 1 hour for it.
Incredible.
1 hour.
Just 1 hour.
They had to get them in the ring, and there was a load of fucking around with like the wrapping of the hands and the gloves, and they pulled Eubank's entrance music, so he was a bit late coming out, and the ITV guys must have been going mental
behind the scenes.
And in the end, Gary Newbon had to interview Eubank, basically, I think, before even the announcement had been made at the end. Obviously, he'd won because it was a stoppage, but it was so condensed and so tight, and you look at it now, it's just... it's completely 3.5 hours. Yeah, exactly. It's completely different. But it was. I remember the first boxing I really kind of remember watching was 1980. Like you say, the Tyson thing. I was aware of it and I watched it.
Yeah.
And it was America, and everything looks a bit different, and so you think, wow, like this is
even the camera quality looks a bit different.
Everything looked different. The canvases look different. The advertising's different. So I remember that did make an impression on me. But I remember in '86. Darren Dyer was the guy who really made me pay attention. He was a real good amateur, boxed at welterweight, and I just remember, I didn't know what it was at the time, but I just remember watching, and I think it might have been recorded, or I'm not sure if it was recorded or live, but it was him winning the ABAs, and he won it by stoppage with an uppercut. And then I remember seeing him a few weeks later at the Commonwealth Games, and he was just smashing people.
Really?
He was just knocking people out. I think he won all his fights by stoppage. He won a gold medal. And I remember looking at it and just thinking, this is great. And so that's kind of like, he's sort of my guy, really, because and funnily enough,
I love that. It's such a random guy. I love it.
Really good amateur though, but he does some coaching at Islington, or he did a few years ago anyway. My wife went up there for a bit, and I said, who are your coaches? And she said one day, there's this guy who's like, I think he was a fighter, it's called Darren Dyer, and I just lost my shit completely. And she just didn't. I saw him at a show and just kind of scared him a bit, I think.
So it's good to hear those. I love those. People wouldn't have said, like, no one, you know how many people are going to Google Darren Dyer now and go and look at his fights. I think for me, obviously, look, I'm a massive Nigel Benn fan, just because that aura, you talk about Eubank and Benn, it's just the polar opposites. I loved it for some reason. But I think for me growing up, it was always Prince Nassim Hamed. Like, when you mentioned you've never seen nothing like Eubank before, I'd never seen anything like Prince Nassim. I was like, who is this arrogant little fucker that's wearing a skirt?
I know.
A leopard skirt. I was like, what? And he's flipping the... I was like, what's he doing? And he was only about 5'4". I was like, too arrogant. Far too arrogant. But then he just looked so good in the ring. His style was all over the place. But I just thought, this is perfect. And I remember there was an advert when he started to do this American thing. And I don't know, you probably remember it was an Adidas advert. And he flips off the ferry or whatever it was. And I think they says, he's here. And I was like, oh my God. We've not anything like this before. We've never seen anything like this going to America. Obviously, it didn't quite work out, but he was incredible for me, Nassim, growing up.
Yeah, he was. The 90s were a really interesting decade for that, because you had Nassim, really, who kind of dominated things, but you had boxing to a large extent went off terrestrial TV and onto Sky. But he was still a massive star. And I think he kind of proved that. They signed that crazy deal with Eubank originally, where I think they thought he was going to fight 8 times in a year or something absurd, which he obviously wasn't going to. And they did those fights with Collins, but Nassim was really, he proved, and Hatton after him, but Nassim was the first, wasn't he? He proved that you could box on cable and still be a massive star, because he definitely was. He was huge. He was moving so fast. He was too young to fight for a British title, so he fought for the European instead. And the whole Ingle Gym thing that was going on, which I've heard a lot about from Johnny down the years, was just fascinating. It was a real epicenter. And then Manchester was, as it followed it with Hatton. And when you talk to people who were involved at that time, I'm always curious, were you aware of that you were right in the middle of something that
massive.
Was something massive. And I always love it when people say, I was, because you just think, God, what a waste if you weren't. But Johnny said, and Ryan Rhodes said the same when we spoke to him. He said, we knew, and we made sure we enjoyed every second of it.
It's funny you mentioned Ricky there, because Ricky was probably, don't get me wrong, Benn, Eubank, Nassim, Joe Calzaghe, even to an extent Lennox Lewis, all massive stars. But in terms of that star that could actually carry people to America, Ricky was probably the first over here of like 20,000 would get on a plane and go with him, which was just unheard of. I mean, you're not doing that. And I think even the Americans were shocked. Like this kid from Manchester can carry this amount over. Ricky was probably, they all were big stars, but in terms of just sheer numbers, Ricky was massive.
Yeah, he was. And I think in the US, they're kind of fascinated by UK support, whatever sport it is, because they look at football, and in American sport, you don't have away supporters, do you?
No
I mean,
chance.
it's too big, isn't it? You can't. Whereas,
you'd have to take a plane for 24 hours to get to some place.
And I think they look at the fanatical level of support in the UK and in European football probably generally, and they are kind of borderline bewildered by it at times. And Hatton had that whole football thing, didn't he? Because of City, obviously, and look at Warrington with Leeds and Nathan Heaney with Stoke, and it works that. Not all the time. Everybody kind of chases it, right?
I hate when people do it now. People chase it now.
They do.
And they attach themselves to clubs when there is no connection.
Yeah.
And I can see someone's obviously had a whisper in their ear, like, okay, you support him. And fans see through that.
They do, yeah. They do. They really do. But for Hatton, it was absolutely, it was incredible, wasn't it? Those stories about those American nights. I mean, it just, I don't think you'll ever get somebody like that again.
Can't think of it.
Honestly, no. In those numbers. It was such an achievement. And it makes me laugh when people don't say this loads actually, but maybe not quite so much anymore, but it makes me laugh when people will say, oh, well, Ricky used to blow up in weight in between fights, and if he hadn't done that and lived the life more and all the rest of it, and you think, but if he'd done that,
not the same.
You're not going to get 40,000 people going to Las Vegas.
If he was just a normal guy that didn't go to the pub,
in Manchester,
you need that. Honestly, you need that bit. It's funny because I was talking to someone about Nick Kyrgios, the tennis player, and I'm like, you can't take that out of his game.
No.
It's almost like the Wayne Rooney thing, football. You can't take that. You do that, they're just normal human beings. It just doesn't work. And Ricky, the idea of being the local lad and connecting with the people was to have a drink. Yeah. And maybe look a bit like some of the people that are supporting him. Yeah. It just worked. It seemed to work for Ricky. He was incredible. And I think when people have to look at it, even if he did do everything correct, probably not beating Floyd or Manny Pacquiao.
No, I mean, how much better could he really have done?
What are you doing?
That's it. I mean, he was the undisputed number one in his weight division, beating Zhu, which was an absolutely mega night. And then he had a run of good wins in the US. Yeah. Against good fighters, wins that kind of aged pretty well.
Yeah, I think Collazo aged well.
Yeah, that one absolutely did. Yeah, Castillo, Arango, guys like that, good fighters.
Yeah, the mini Mike Tyson. When you're
good fighters, and. Yeah, it just becomes trendy sometimes, doesn't it, to try and take people down and claim they weren't as good as they.
Yeah, they do it a lot.
He only lost. He just lost to those two, and that was it.
Yeah,
I mean,
what's a shame. Obviously, he had that comeback fight after a few years out. We don't count that. We move away from that. You've been to so many, obviously, boxing events. You've commentated on hundreds. Is there one that kind of stands out? Like, what a night.
Yeah, there's a couple.
There's only one where your voice has gone. I remember that one.
Fury Wilder. Yeah, that was the most difficult because that was radio, and I think we did like 3 or 4 fights beforehand, and most of them went the distance, and then that fight was so incredible. It was so up there the whole way through. I remember thinking at one point, like, this is. I was kind of, you're trying to look after your voice a little bit because you're thinking this is not a normal situation. This is not a normal situation. But it got there for me. But that was an amazing night. That's definitely up there. The first one would have been Lucien Boutte against Carl Froch.
Incredible.
And anyone who was at that will tell you the same thing. Like, I don't think I will ever go to a fight with a better atmosphere than that.
Really?
Yeah, honestly, okay. He came in. He ring walked really late because it wasn't on one of the kind of big networks in North America, but it was on somewhere.
Yeah.
So it was about midnight by the time he came in, and
Which
the place
is
was
late.
Yeah, and the place was absolutely rammed. People had just like fallen out of the pub and gone in there. And the Nottingham Arena, you would have been for Leeward Michael Conlon. It's really good.
It's almost like a bowl.
So steep.
Yeah.
10,000 probably, 10,000, something like that. And that was, I did the undercard, and then Ian Darke was still commentating for Sky at the time. He did the top of the bill. So I'd no work to do by the time that. It was when he came into No Easy Way Out, the place just went crazy.
I'm laughing now because that's how good it was.
Yeah.
Me as a fan, obviously, that's before I'm even thinking about getting into broadcasting. And I used to do this channel with a guy called Ryan. We used to go to his house, just watch boxing. Remember watching that fight. And obviously the backdrop to it is that obviously Carl had lost to Andre Ward, and this would be the end for Carl. And
that's it.
People were like, we're not quite sure about Lucian Booty. Is he the number one in the division? We weren't sure because he didn't enter the Super Series.
Big rep.
Yeah, and everyone was like, oh, this is it. And I remember him being a bit bigger than Carl, and I was thinking, Carl might get done here. And for Carl just to think, fuck it.
Yeah.
Let's have a tear up then.
Yeah. Well, that's just Froch, isn't it? Because me and Matt got him on to talk about it at one point, and he said that, he was quite nervous in the build-up because Froch is, you've been around Froch, and he's not what he appears to be. He plays this part of being aloof and arrogant and all the rest of it, and he's not that really at all.
Not at all.
And you might well think, if you don't know him a little bit, that he's kind of one of these, bulletproof guys who was always rock solid in his self-belief, like right from, the king of the playground at school and all the rest of it. And he's not that. And fight it. Well, he can be if he needs to be. Yeah. But mostly he's happy to admit that, a lot of the time he was shitting himself. Because how would you not be as a professional fighter? Anyone who says that they're not, I just don't believe them.
You're lying.
Yeah, they're lying. And he said to us in that fight, he was an underdog. And I was a big Froch fan. Like, I loved Froch. I just thought he was just great. But he was a big underdog, and I was outraged by that because Bute hadn't really... His resume didn't match up to Froch's. Yeah. It just didn't.
He had this mystique about him.
But he absolutely did. And he came with this big rep. And I think Carl said to me and Matt, the first couple of rounds, not an awful lot happened. And Bute had this much vaunted uppercut. And he said he hit him to the body, I think, with an uppercut rather than the head. And he thought to himself, Christ, that really hurt. And then he sat down in between rounds and then just thought, fuck this. If I'm going out, I'm going out swinging. And then he just brutalised him.
You got to love it.
Yeah.
Honestly, you got to love Carl Froch. Carl, he has to go down as one of Britain's best.
I think so.
Look at the CV. I know, and again, people can't separate, like you said, the Carl that people see in front of the camera and then his resume. And look at Carl's resume and it's solid. I mean, to fight Arthur Abraham away as well, that was coming off the Kessler loss, I think, in Denmark.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, to fight Arthur Abraham away. Again, another pressure fight for him to go into that. And then the George Groves rematch, which I thought was just... insane. Yeah, insane. Carl Froch, I completely love. Is there a massive difference between radio commentary and TV commentary? Is it because on TV you don't have to give as much because we can see it, or?
Yeah, simply put, that's it. Basically, it's radio's. I think it's actually easier.
Not radio.
Yeah, because there's less.
And you're working harder because I've been next to you and your notes.
You are. Yeah, I mean, I take them with me, but really the point of it is that it's supposed to be up here and it's just there in case. Radio, you haven't really got as much time to interpret. You kind of leave that to between rounds, and what you're doing basically is saying what you're seeing because that's what you have. That's what you're there for.
Yeah.
The skill with that is to not repeat yourself too much. But I don't find that particularly difficult. So it's more it's simpler. TV's a little bit more difficult because you can't just say what you see because people can already see it. It doesn't stop people doing it, but that's not what you're there for. You're there to kind of give people an idea of what's happening and why it's happening. And I do think there's a responsibility on the play-by-play commentator as well as the pundit to do that. You have to read the fight and tell people who may or may not be winning. You don't have to know your colours to the mast, but you have to explain things.
I think that's important, actually.
It takes responsibility for it.
Yeah, it's massive responsibility because, again, you've got fans at home and obviously, look, people like to critique very quickly on social media, but they are expecting their commentators to be as unbiased as possible and say it how it is as opposed to saying it because you support a fighter or he's the home fighter or the TV network's fighter.
Yeah, you can't ever go down that route. Yeah. You see people do it, and I think to myself sometimes, and it can be in the role you do as well. Yeah. And I think to myself sometimes, okay, maybe we've all got to make a living, and if you think that's going to keep you in the job longer, and you've decided to go down that route, then that's your decision. But it's just not something I would ever do because. I don't think there's much longevity in that.
I'm finding it difficult now to balance. I'm finding it difficult to do my YouTube channel where everyone expects honesty as soon as I sit on the green chair. And then obviously if DAZN put out a crap card or whatever they're doing, they have done some, everyone's expecting Ade to get on the green chair and say, well, that card was shit. And I'm like, well, easy people, I can't go that route, but I need to almost balance the two and be as honest as possible without losing your job, basically.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's a good example, because I think people have the idea that if you're going to the honesty and kind of being honest and being confrontational are the same thing, and they don't have to be.
No.
I mean, one of my main rules is never write a fight off. You might see a match made and think, God, that's a terrible fight. But you don't actually know what's going to happen.
It's impossible to write a
boxing fight. Because sometimes something mad will happen. So you can say, well, on paper, we might have expected him to face someone a little bit stronger than this, but let's have a look at this guy and what he does bring. And you're not copping out. It's just that's the only respectful way to do that.
Yeah.
Because you can't, to write a fight off before it's even happened, firstly, every now and again will make you look like an absolute tool, because something will happen you're not expecting. But it's just massively disrespectful to the people involved.
Yeah.
And that's not because you're trying to please the promoter. Forget about him. The two guys.
It's more the boxers.
Yeah, you can't go
especially
that
now
route.
that I see them all the time. And I think I said Chisora Pulev's going to be carnage for the first 6-7 rounds. I said I've watched Pulev, who's not the same Pulev that used to have the best jab in the heavyweight division.
Who beat him with that.
Yeah, exactly.
6 years
I said
ago.
it's not that guy anymore. These are two guys now that are crazy. They're going to meet in the centre of the ring and go hell for leather for 5 or 6 rounds. Everyone's like, oh no, you're only saying it because you work for the DAZN. It's a crap fight. I was like, I'm saying it because I think it's going to happen like that. Not because I work for the DAZN. So
no,
I'm struggling to do that.
Yeah, you'll always get people who say that anyway, whatever you say or whatever you do. Like I noticed that. So I was kind of like doing bits and pieces, or sort of irregularly at Sky. Sometimes quite a bit of stuff, then not too much, and worked for Box Nation and just loads of different people. Then kind of 2016. I started what turned into about 5 years, basically working pretty much full time at Sky, really. And as soon as I started doing that, like the kind of the cred that you got for being like a guy on Box Nation and obviously hardcore and all the rest of it, all of a sudden you just that just goes out the window, and you just get. I think somebody called me a big floppy matchroom cock at one point, and that was quite early on. And I remember just thinking, "Wow, like this hasn't taken long, has it? Like, I'm doing this exactly the same way. I've always done it."
Yeah.
And I think, what was that about? I think that was it. I was doing Gav McDonnell against Ray Vargas in Hull. And Ray Vargas clearly won, but I thought he was probably going to stop him. After halfway, I thought Gav McDonnell's in trouble here. But he rallied in the second half and actually did pretty well. And that's basically all I said was, I think Gavin, give him some props. I think he's done well in the second half of the fight. And that's enough for people to basically accuse you of doing all sorts of things with Eddie Hearn.
It's mental. As long as we don't have a parody account like Johnny Nelson.
It's good that though, isn't it?
I go on it regularly.
Yeah, it's funny.
I think he said the other day
Johnny
that
likes it, I think, as well.
What did he say the other day? Usyk's not that good at southpaw.
Yeah, he's an average southpaw.
Yeah, and I was like, Johnny, what are you doing? I was like, what are you doing, Johnny? And he started to name other southpaws. I was like, stop now.
Yeah.
Stop right now, Johnny, because the hole's getting deeper and deeper. I want to talk about fights now. Let's talk about some current ones. I guess AJ Usyk's the big one, or should I say Usyk AJ. New trainer now for AJ. I remember actually me and you speaking about this on Boxing Social. I think me, you, Rob Tebbett, and I think it might have been Declan, I can't remember. And we started speaking about that. I think we all said that Usyk has got not just a good chance, a great chance of beating AJ the first time round, just because we know how good Usyk is. Now he's beaten AJ, and he seems even more confident. I think he looks a bit thicker as well. I know AJ's got a new trainer, but is it a harder task second time round for AJ than it was the first time now even?
I think it might be.
Yeah.
I think it might be because Usyk's seen him once, and he can be somewhat different the second time, but he can't be that different in terms of the way he boxes and the style he's got and what he brings. He's not going to be that different. Usyk, I just think, can do it any which way.
So good.
And one thing I heard last week, which really set alarm bells ringing with me, was when Anthony was talking about the corner in the previous fight, and he said, I thought I was winning based on what they were telling me. I thought I was boxing really well. I thought I was winning, and I just thought you should have been able to figure out that you weren't winning. And I think the difference between him and Usyk and Fury as well is that, and he's not the only one, but the difference between
if you're going to compare those
a really good fighter and, if you like, an elite level fighter is that elite level fighters don't need anyone to tell them.
They just know.
They know.
They know.
It reminded me when Quigg boxed Frampton a few years ago.
Great fight, great atmosphere.
Yeah, I loved that. They press tour, everything. It was brilliant.
Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah.
And I remember Frampton at one point just saying to Quigg, "You cannot beat me, and the reason you can't beat me is because you can't think for yourself. Like you need your trainer to tell you what to do. I can think for myself, and if things are going wrong in there,
I know what to do.
I will figure it out. Shane's a good trainer, but I don't need him to tell me." That's basically what he was saying. And it's the same kind of thing. It's the same kind of thing. And that's why I think that AJ actually can't beat Usyk or Fury. And maybe most of the rest of the division can't either. I think those two are in a class of their own. And one of the reasons is that they have been doing it longer. Usyk's not been doing it that much longer, but they've both been doing it longer, and they can just figure it out.
He walked in. I was at the press conference in London, and he walked in. Obviously, AJ walks in, and he's very confident within himself, speaks well, knows what he's doing. Usyk walked in as a man that's just going to the shop or something. It's hard to explain. Just kind of whistling, he done a little turn and twirl before he sat down. And normally when I see people do it, I'm like, oh, they're a bit nervous and they're trying to pretend they're not nervous. But he was just super laughing and joking. And then I interviewed him, and he's got these menacing blue eyes. Like I think they're blue anyway, but they're menacing. They look at you and they're smiling, but at the same time, he's almost like a serial killer.
Yeah, I know.
Like he's almost like he's trying to pretend like he's not, like there's something not quite right. But I don't think I've ever seen someone so, Fury with him actually. Fury is confident, but he's so supremely confident. Yeah, like it's almost like,
and it's really, really convincing, isn't it?
So convincing. So if he's trying to sell something, it's sold. I
always think that's a real interesting thing about fight week. Sometimes when you see someone who maybe you've not seen much in fight week, or maybe never seen in fight week, and you're trying to get a handle on whether their confidence is real. Yeah. Whether it's justified or not is another thing. But do they believe in themselves or don't they? And that week, it wasn't just him. It was Egis, Klimas, Alex Krassyuk, all the guys around him. They were so confident. Yeah. I remember being up on the top of the hotel with Andy one day, Andy Scott. He was doing some interviews, and Egis came up, and I think Alex was there as well. And it might have been the day or the day after that Eddie had announced his lifetime deal with AJ. And Alex just said to us, he just said, "What is this lifetime deal? 3 days." And they were so confident,
mate. Almost bordering on arrogance, but it's almost when you've got the horse in the race, like for some reason you just know that I've got the right horse. I'm backing the right horse.
What convinced me about it so much was that you could tell when you spoke to them that they were genuinely, absolutely bewildered by the idea that people were making Joshua favourite.
Yeah.
They couldn't understand it. It was like, but have you never seen our guy?
Yeah.
And we were just saying, but he's not really boxed much a heavyweight. And they're like, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I think is a hell of a job, kind of. It's a hell of a job that Robert Garcia's got to do with AJ. And maybe that's his main job, basically, is you can tighten up a few little things here and there. But just try and make him believe that he can that he can win.
He's got to go through a brick wall to beat him. Yeah. I'm not sure. I remember sitting down with Tony Bellew. We done something for DAZN where it wasn't nice on Tony. We had to go back and watch his fight with Usyk, and you see Tony still watching it, almost bewildered about what's going on as he's telling me what's going on. It's hard to explain. And he's like, "Ade, I'm telling you now, from round 2, I knew I was fucked." Like, he's doing things that I've not seen before. Like, I'm 100 miles per hour mentally. And I can tell that he's still got gears to go.
Yeah.
And then it got to round 4 or 5 and I knew I was gone. Like, he said it, we're watching it, I think it's round 5, and he's like, "I'm gone there." And I can't see it. I'm like, "But you still look like," he said, "No, I'm gone." Yeah. I can tell because there's nothing in the gas tank. And I can feel that this guy is not breathing heavily and there's still loads more left. And then he said, that's when I realised this is the best fighter I've ever been in with. Amateur or pro, he's just too good for me. And that scares me. When I was thinking, and obviously I'm a big AJ fan, I was like, oh. When I heard that, I was like, God, AJ's got a problem here. If he can't dent him, like really dent him, and I haven't seen AJ dent anyone properly for a long time, then I don't know what he's going to do. And as much as everyone says AJ is a lot bigger and stronger, AJ is bigger. I mean, it looks more muscular, but Usyk's quite thick as well. He's not small. You know what I mean? Like AJ's taller, but Usyk's actually quite wide. Yeah. So he's not a small boy himself either.
No, we're not. You're not talking. I know in
this
heavyweight
isn't Fury
terms,
to Usyk.
No, in heavyweight terms, you're not talking a massive difference because Usyk will probably be about 220 by now, I reckon.
Yeah.
And Anthony, generally his best weight's about 240, 245, isn't it?
That's not that.
So it's not that
Everyone
much.
makes it look like bloody David and Goliath. It's not that.
If you're thinking about it in terms of percentages, it's not, I can't work it out, but it's not that bad. Whereas, you know, Fury, in that second fight against Wilder was 277, and for that reason Wilder bulked up to 230, did he, or something like that. But even putting muscle on, which people thought was a bad idea, still made him 3 stone lighter than Fury.
Crazy.
And that's, but I look at what Wilder did in that fight, and off the back of what happened in the previous one,
I've got to give so much respect for Wilder.
So full of admiration for him because he did what people say they're going to do, but the very few people actually do, which is roll the dice and risk it all.
And
in the end, he did get knocked out.
Yeah,
but he was
at
dead
one
on
stage,
his feet.
I thought, oh my God, he's done it.
Yeah, and he could have got badly knocked out because he was so tired. But he nearly won. You know, in that round 4, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When he put him down twice, you just think,
oh my God,
he's going to do it.
I thought he's done it. I thought, oh my God.
Yeah.
That punch that went through Fury's body and the whole body kind of then started to shit. I was like, because that's the punch there that I think cleans out any heavyweight. No heavyweight's getting up because it was full force on the button. I was like, how Fury got up from that again?
That's it. I came away from that fight thinking to myself, if Wilder can be the same again after that, and there's no guarantees there, then he beats everyone else.
Everyone. Including Usyk?
Maybe not him, but everyone else he beats. And I stick to that. And I hope he is. I hope he has still got plenty left when he does come back. I'm desperate
for him to come back, by the
way. I am as well.
I wasn't before. I was like, you know, my thing's always been get in, get rich and get out.
Yeah.
You know, he's made a lot of money. He's become world champion. He must have, I don't know, 80 to 90. I don't know what he's got in the bank, but there's a lot there now. He's got all his faculties in place. He's got a wife and do that.
But now I'm like, he can't leave it like that, can he?
Come back.
He can't.
I've called it chaos in Lagos. I don't know if you saw my tweet, him versus AJ.
Yeah.
I said that in Nigeria would be...
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
That'd be amazing. I do think that's going to happen at some point in a fight.
Him versus AJ.
Well, yeah, hopefully, but a fight in Nigeria.
I
as
hope
well.
so.
I think it needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, even if the fighters don't make 100 million each, like,
people are very sniffy about it. Like you know, it'll get mentioned and people will kind of dismiss it. Or I remember someone saying to me at one point, I won't say who it was, but still that's a bit far fetched.
It's crazy, isn't it?
What do you mean far-fetched?
Yeah, it's mental. It's mental. They've obviously...
I understand.
I understand as well. If you've not been there and you don't understand, obviously you've got a Nigerian wife. But obviously me being over there, I'm like, of course it can happen. Like, do it.
It'd be massive as well.
Oh my God.
It'd be absolutely
especially for
massive.
Those two. AJ was he 6'5", 6'6", Wilder the same.
Yeah.
Oh, it'd be just the greatest thing ever to happen in Nigeria. And fingers crossed someone's listening that has a lot of money that can put it together. Moving away from the heavyweights, Errol Spence, Terence Crawford's the fight that we all want to see. I mean, as much as AJ Fury and the rest and Golovkin, Canelo, that Spence Crawford's the one that you ask 100 people, it's 50-50 split. People to make their arguments for both. I always edge towards Crawford, but I have no idea because I think Errol's still got a lot left. It looks like it will happen. Rumours are anyway, September, October. That's the fight, isn't it? That's the one.
Yeah, and it's great that if it does happen, that'll be brilliant because you don't want too many of them to slip away.
Yeah,
a few always do, but you can't have too many. So long, in boxing, so long as enough of the really big fights are being made, then we're okay.
We've had a lot in the last 3 years.
And we have,
as much as people like to moan, I think we've had a lot.
We're in a good spell.
We've only had maybe about 3 or 4 that I can think, why didn't that happen?
Yeah, I think we're in a good spell. And I think I would go with Crawford as well.
Yeah,
I like Spence.
You're about to
I really
You're
like
about
Spence.
to say but.
Yeah, but I do think Spence is absolutely terrific. One of my favourite fights I've commentated on was his fight against Sean Porter, which was a brilliant fight. And when I was doing the Sky rankings, I would always have Spence ahead of Crawford because he was a unified champion. But Crawford's just, I think it might be because I've met Crawford in person. And it was Fury Wilder fight week because they were announcing his fight against Porter, and I just kind of, again, I just found him very convincing. Not that he said much. He said
very convincing.
He said very, very little. But that
when
was
he says he's going to beat you, you genuinely believe that. Okay, he's going to win. Then
and he kind of he looks to me like he's one of these guys who will have that razor sharp competitive edge until the day he dies. I remember talking to Barry about it, Barry Jones, and we were both saying that, like Josh Taylor, if you looked at him the wrong way walking down the street when he's 75, he's going to take your head off.
Yeah, there might be a problem. Another thing with Crawford as well that I like, and I know Errol does it now, but I've never seen Crawford out of shape. And I always look for that. I remember Bernard Hopkins always used to say that he should touch his opponents around the midriff, just to, are they still in shape?
Yeah.
And Crawford looks like he's got a six-pack regardless.
Yeah.
And I like that. It means
he's all sharp edges.
Always.
Like whatever he's wearing, you just think, if I touch
like there's muscle here and there. And I've seen Spence not live the life. We've obviously seen the accident, and I don't know he's the same since then. He's had obviously a couple of really good wins.
Yeah.
But I've seen him get touched a lot in the ring now. Yordenis Ugas had him in big problems.
Yeah.
And he found a way to win, so you got to credit that. But Crawford looks like there's gears there.
Well, what Crawford did against Porter, like that corner sound, was just some of the best thing.
What? What? You think I'm losing?
You think I'm losing? Right? Okay, then.
One second.
Let's get this done.
Yeah.
And that's we talk about levels, don't we? And that was, I remember watching that and just thinking, before there was kind of a transcript of it, and just thinking, I'm pretty sure that's what that was about. And then it turned out it was, and there's not many. Spence is a top draw fighter, but I think Crawford is just that absolute, Hall of Fame level.
First ballot Hall of Fame, special. And look, Spence might be there as well. And regardless, I think if Spence wins or loses, he's going to 154 pounds, and he might win a title there. Who knows? He's a big, big boy. Canelo Golovkin III. Do we need to see it? It's going to happen. Is it one that's like you jumping off the book to see? Do you care too much about it?
Oh no, I do care, and I will. I do really want to see it. I think it's a shame it's taken this long to make.
Yeah,
I do feel sympathy for Golovkin throughout the whole thing, because I've got no problem with Canelo at all. But I've always been a Triple G fan
all the time.
But I think he did win that first fight.
Of course he did,
and no one will ever convince me otherwise. The second one. Canelo getting the second one was okay.
Give a draw.
The second one could have been a draw, but Canelo getting the second one was okay. I didn't have a problem with that. But Golovkin did win that first fight.
It pains me, again, I'm a big Golovkin fan as well, that he will retire, and I don't think he's going to win the third one, and he won't have that win on his CV. He won't have that proper A-star name on his CV. Pains me.
Yeah, me too. And I think that's he was always going to go after this third fight, because he can't leave it there. It's like Wilder. And you know how competitive these people are, and you do, for his own sanity and for his ability to live the rest of his life in some kind of peace. I just really want him to win.
Yeah. You think he's got a chance?
Now it's a super middleweight. Not especially.
I think he looked very bulky against Murata.
Yeah.
So almost stiff, he looked like a bodybuilder. His chest was all big. I'm thinking you're going to slap on another 8 pounds, and it won't be fat, will it? It'll be 8 pounds of muscle on that. It's going to be even slower. And some people said, it'll help him, won't have to make weight. I said, it doesn't really work like that.
No, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. Golovkin at middleweight was, he was like, it's a bit
perfect for it.
Yeah, it's like Froch at super middleweight.
Yeah.
He'd always in shape. He'd only have to trim off 4 or 5 pounds, make it. He would never be big at the weight on the night as people like to be.
Doesn't matter.
It's just the weight you're strongest at, and he's definitely not strongest at super middleweight. Strongest at middleweight, and that's the other shame about it as well. Because if Canelo does win that third fight, people will discredit it for that reason. And he'll never get any peace with that trilogy either, because people will be telling him,
you lost the first one,
you lost the first one, and you might have won the second one, and then in the third one you waited until he was old and forced him up in weight. That's what they'll say.
That's boxing fans.
Boxing fans,
literally, they'll always find a way to discredit the run, no matter what.
Yeah, exactly.
No matter what. He cleaned out a 168. But
it does make me laugh. Actually, it is pretty entertaining. But yeah, they do. But that is what will happen with that. They'll, people will find a way to kind of tear it down. But unfortunately, I don't see a Golovkin win.
No, I don't see how it's possible. I mean, I don't say you knock Canelo out. I've seen him now get hit by everyone, and it doesn't seem to even take a backward step. I've not even seen him stumble. I know. Bivol kind of made him go back to the ropes, but it was more through tiredness than anything else. It didn't never look like he was hurt. And I think, well, if Bivol can't hurt you and no one can, and Golovkin's hit him clean on the chin and it didn't do anything, I just don't see what happens. If anything, I see it, hate this, I thought like I see Golovkin getting stopped.
Could
to the body maybe. Looks like happen. He doesn't really like those to the body anymore.
Yeah, could happen. Could happen. But I do just kind of worry a little bit that it'll just have a bad knock-on effect on the rest of his life, basically.
Golovkin.
Yeah,
it will. Especially if he gets stopped by someone that he thought, not just that you beat, and let's put it on the table, someone he thought cheated in the second time, the lead up to that fight. Yeah. That's why that was delayed. So he doesn't like him anyway.
No.
He doesn't like him, doesn't like the judges, don't like the whole thing, really. So it will be a shame if Golovkin doesn't get a win, and I don't think it will. Who excites you in American boxing at the moment? Is there any, do you look at any of the young kids coming through, like a Shakur Stevenson or anyone?
Yeah, I mean, Shakur's the obvious one because he's delivering on the ability he's got, and it maybe took a little while, but Top Rank are really good at matching their fighters. And what happens sometimes is that they'll match them properly early, and that results in the fighter maybe not looking as mind-blowingly impressive as people think they're going to, because they're not just getting fed bodies. And then the criticism comes that maybe they're not going to be what they think they'll be. But they're just being matched properly. But I think he's got everything you could possibly want, really. Special. And I just remember the Olympics when he won silver, and his reaction to winning silver. He cried on NBC, didn't he? He cried on NBC.
Literally screamed.
19 years old, and I thought, wow, that's great, because he lost to Ramirez, who won gold in London. Supersonic amateur, like one of the best I've seen at ringside. I think one of my favourites, definitely. And so there's not much shame in that at 19, and it was close. But he was just devastated, and you think, God, that bodes well for the rest of his career. So I mean, I think you've probably picked out I've always really, he's not a newcomer anymore, but I've always loved Gervonta Davis.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
I'm getting nervous that he's become sort of just so reliant on his power and he's forgot his boxing skills for some reason. Maybe. Like, I remember him not getting hit too much, and now every seems to fight, he seems to be losing, then he stops you, which might be his way. I mean, it's clearly working for him.
I just like I just love the whole package.
The anger.
Yeah, him and Calvin, and where he's from, and
doesn't play, does he?
No, he really doesn't. He really doesn't. And I would love to see him in there with the people that we want to see him in there with, basically. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And some of those fights do really need to happen, because obviously when Lopez beat Lomachenko, everybody's talking about this new era of new kings and all the rest of it, and none of them have fought each other.
It's crazy, isn't it?
None of them.
It's horrible. Like, I'm going to America to work for DAZN on the Garcia Fortuna fight, and Ryan's got to win. He's got to win. He's got to not just win, look impressive, then he's got to fight someone. Not just, Oscar start calling out Javon. Like, start making fights. Just don't do it on Twitter for the sake of us as fans. Make them behind the scenes. And I do wonder if anything's going to happen because of DAZN and PBC and all. What would you make of all these broadcasters now? There seems to be so many.
Yeah, it's a problem, isn't it?
It is a problem, isn't it?
You look at it over
here. Even over here.
Yeah, it's a problem over here, because you've got Sky, BT, DAZN, Channel 5, and Channel 5 don't do as many cards, but they've still got some good fighters like Josh Kelly and Harlem Eubank, who you would look at and just think, God, there's some guys you'd really love to see them against from the other stables. But if you just concentrate on the big three in terms of the number of shows they do, Sky, BT and DAZN, there's almost too many shows and not enough fighters.
It's just not enough. It's
to have real depth. Yeah. And that it's more important than ever that people work together. But it's really easy for me to say that. I understand.
I have no idea what goes on behind the scenes and wanting your product involved on another platform.
Yeah.
And making it look good. Like I saw the other day, Chris Billam-Smith fighting Isaac Chamberlain on Sky. And I thought, 1 second, Chris Billam-Smith was on DAZN, Isaac Chamberlain was on Channel 5. They've gone into Sky and fought. And I'm like, okay, at least they're fighting. I'm happy they're fighting somewhere. But I just feel like there's almost too much going on now.
Yeah. I mean, it's great if you're us, because it's what we do, and there's lots of places to work. But it's not an ideal situation. I mean, there's a fight week pretty much every week. Yeah. But there haven't been that many that have really caught the eye. Yeah. That's the thing.
Now, you was at the Joe Joyce Christian Hamer fight card, right? And obviously Jason Cunningham Tete was good, but then it gets really thin where people don't really start to know the names after.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. That's the big problem. Yeah.
Yeah, the week before I was in Coventry for the Sky one, and that was, I enjoyed it. It was a good card, but at the same time, there was very little name recognition on there for people who aren't us, basically. Yeah. And I wonder what the numbers are for those kinds of shows. I mean, Sky are heavily backing the relaunch, and that's great because it would have been bad for boxing if they'd kind of
just
slunk into the long grass. Yeah, after Matchroom left.
Does that surprise you? Very good that they continue, because I honestly thought that they might stop. I thought they might think, you know what, we're going to pump all our money into football. BT Sports are coming and they're putting a lot of content and money into football, so boxing doesn't bring us much. Let Matchroom have it.
I wouldn't have been amazed if that had happened. I think as it was approaching the kind of D-Day for Matchroom and Sky, I was always convinced that Eddie was going to go with DAZN, because otherwise what was it all for? Yeah. And they were going to plonk a load more money on the table. So I always thought that was what was going to happen. I think at Sky there was quite a significant level of denial about that, and I don't think they would necessarily mind me saying that. No. Because they didn't want it to happen.
Of course not. That relationship was fantastic. Yeah. I loved it.
But then it did happen. Yeah. And they got the deal with Top Rank together and came out swinging. And we didn't know, because that's where I was at the time. We didn't know whether they were going to or not. And there was a lot of relief when it was obvious that was what they were going to do. And funnily enough, I remember saying to a few people in the build-up to the whole thing, listen, if Eddie does leave, that's not necessarily, as long as Sky stay in boxing, and I know you'd think, but what fighters will we get? It's not necessarily a bad thing, because that relationship's been going on for 10 years. They've already done the DAZN thing in America. It's all got a bit weird. You know, maybe that's time to maybe that's run its course and it's time for something new.
It was starting to get awkward for Adam Smith answering
something
questions
new anyway.
as well.
Yeah, it was the whole thing was pretty.
Yeah,
pretty
but Eddie better put some effort into what he does in the UK, because all the DAZN cards are really good in America.
Yeah. And also one thing I also think that did happen. I've no corroboration of this. It's just what I think. I think if Eddie, when they left, if he'd just said, Sky have been amazing. We've absolutely loved every second of it, but we've got to do what's best for our company, and this is a great offer, and it's with a heavy heart and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, all the stuff that when a player leaves a club.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Just write that. Just get a bit of paper and write something down and release it. Yeah.
That's it. But he didn't. No, he couldn't help himself.
Yes, Eddie,
he couldn't help himself. Basically, say, I can't wait to do this without Sky, and I would bet money that went down like a cup of cold sick, and would have been part of the reason why they thought, oh, okay then. I have been surprised, and I continually say it, with some of the signings. So the Olympians, which obviously Matchroom and DAZN would definitely have wanted. Oh, do you know what I mean? Money.
Big money. Yeah. And then I'm starting to see Liam Smith, and I know people might say he's not a big draw, but then
he's good for a few fights.
Good for a few fights, coming off the Vargas win, the Fowler win, and then Joseph Parker leaves. I'm like, what's going on? And then obviously you get Savannah Marshall, Clarissa Shields, and Baumgartner Meyer, and I was convinced that was going to go on box office. I remember telling someone, okay, Clarissa Shields, Savannah's a difficult sell on box office, but then when they said Baumgartner Meyer, I was like, they can't afford that, box office, it has to be. And then I was like, no, it's a regular Saturday, and I was like, okay, this is a declaration of war. This is a declaration of war.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because it's what they've got so heavily behind it, to the point where they don't seem bothered about pay-per-views at the minute. They had one with Carnbrook, which I don't know the numbers, but I'd imagine probably did pretty well.
Has to have done.
And they probably won't have another one this year. There isn't an obvious one.
There isn't an obvious fight to have this year.
Exactly. There isn't an obvious one I can think of. There really isn't. Unless they end up doing Saudi, of course, which could still happen. But they've got heavily behind women's boxing. And part of the reason for that, I think it's been partly coincidence, because they've struggled to sign name men, and they're still struggling. And they're still struggling to do that. Yeah. So I think that's one of the reasons why they've got heavily behind female boxing, and they went and got the Olympians. So it's a longer term project than maybe they would have hoped. But there's always the chance that people will start jumping over the fence. So I'm not saying they will necessarily, but it's always a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, if you can offer more money, I mean, this is what these boxers are in this for. Pay them more.
Yeah.
Do you think it's free? It is free now competing with each other, isn't it? I mean, again, no disrespect to Channel 5 and what they're doing, but it seems to be a big free now as opposed to what it's been for years.
It is.
Two.
I think it probably... It just depends on the will still being there from the network. I know that Frank Warren's got, like, I think they renewed fairly recently. He's got 4 years.
Must have been happy with the Fury White stuff as well.
Yeah, exactly. And like BT emerging with Discovery, basically. I think you'd imagine that Discovery will basically end up just buying it out. And I think sport's quite big for them, which would make sense because they're kind of like an outward bound channel or whatever. So that would, 4 years is as long as you ever get in boxing. That seems pretty solid. Sky signed 4-year deals. I do sometimes wonder how long would they be willing to go without pay-per-view, which is...
That's the big thing.
When I was in the thick of that, they wanted 4, maybe 6 a year. That was what they really wanted.
Well.
And it was that.
And it was that, yeah.
Some of them would get criticised, but at least 2 or 3 would be big.
Think of some of the big ones. Removing AJ from it, the Bellew Hay ones.
Yeah,
were
they
massive.
They were huge. They had great numbers,
huge.
those. Yeah.
Oh, mate.
Yeah.
When I think of it now, 2 perfect salesmen.
Yeah.
Going head to head twice.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Sky must have been like that. Like, literally, bring home the bacon.
Yeah, that's it. And Dillian White did well for them, too.
Yeah,
I think numbers-wise, he did pretty well. You know, you think about the fight with the rematch with Chisora, Joseph Parker, Rivas. You know, he had a good little run there.
Yeah.
And let's say some of them would get criticised, but I think Bellew Usyk did well.
That must have done well. Especially after Bellew knocking out Hay, that must have done incredible numbers.
So I guess I do just kind of wonder how long that patience will last. But then at the same time, having put what they put into it up until this point, you can't see them folding with it.
No, you put too much effort into it.
That's it. And with DAZN, like people kind of query it all the time, but at the same time, they started in America in 2018, and they're still going. That's 4 years.
It's funny how everyone says that about them. And I'm like, well, especially recently, they went back-to-back with Taylor Serrano and then Canelo Bivol, back-to-back in America. Yeah. So even if it doesn't quite work out of the smaller shows, they've got those, they'd have a couple of monster ones every so often. Canelo Golovkin will do massive numbers for
events. They put on some massive events in America. And it's not even a year yet since the UK move. And people are always kind of questioning, the business model and breaking even.
I love when people talk.
What's that got to do with you? What has that got to do with you? Just relax.
Like,
and either buy DAZN or don't.
Yeah, I ain't buying this crap. It's rubbish.
You don't have to.
Yeah.
And there's loads I like about it, but loads of my friends like you are working on it. You want it to go well.
I want it to be okay.
And I like the fact that you can unsubscribe, because I had a run where, like last autumn, kind of October, November time, where I looked at the schedule and thought,
not for me.
No, it wasn't that. But I just thought every single one of these, I'm working somewhere else that night.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm not going to be able to watch any of them. And like £8's not, it's not going to. But I just like the fact that I could just say, all right, well, I can unsubscribe and then just come back when I know that I can watch them. So I think there's a lot to like about it.
I'm obviously biased by it, but I've said, like, when people ask me about the best fights I've been to ringside, I said to them, like, in terms of atmosphere, the fight was rubbish. It didn't do anything. But Lara Warrington 2 at Headingley, when Warrington came out, honestly, incredible. And Lee Wood, Michael Conlon, not Forest fans and the Irish fans on one side. So I've been lucky enough to be with some fantastic fights.
And the coverage is really good, and it's
and it's a baby.
Yeah.
It's a baby over here. It's still trying. I know everyone obviously associates it with Matchroom, have been doing it for years, but DAZN's a baby.
I think it's probably, I don't think they ever underestimated it, but I think even still the reality of how much harder it was going to be to get it out there without Sky has proved to be, I think it's probably turned out to be like
a lot harder
than they thought, and I'm sure they thought it was going to be hard.
And they have to be thinking about how they do it without that machine.
How do you do that?
It can't just be Matchroom's channel, and I don't think even a lot of people will watch the DAZN stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And I don't know, but there could be a link up with another Sky channel soon, I think, maybe.
Yeah, you've got to get it on some kind of platform. Like Netflix is on the Sky platform and Amazon and stuff like that. You've got to get it on something like that.
You have to.
And the other thing as well is that ultimately, boxing isn't going to decide whether DAZN succeeds or fails. It's going to be what other sports can they get.
That's it.
That's
it. They're trying to get the football, and I think they need it. I said, I remember telling someone, I said they were talking about Premier League. I was like, just get League Cup.
Just get something.
Get some sort of championship football.
That means that hardcore football fans will have to buy it.
They'll have to. Even if you get the championship football, which they maybe don't deem, it's massive.
It's huge.
Get that. Get the championship. Who doesn't want to watch bloody Sunderland versus Middlesbrough? I'm telling you now, it will do good numbers. So fingers crossed they do. As we wrap, any fight in particular looking forward to this year?
I think about what we got. I am really looking forward to Usyk Joshua too. I think I'm really looking forward to it. You know, it's.
Are TalkSport doing it? Are they? Do you know?
I don't know. I mean, I think that'll be straight bids.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all sorts going on around that, but I think that'll probably end up on the BBC.
Yeah. They'll go massive for it.
Yeah, and I think the Saudis as well would prefer
the connection,
the BBC because it's a lot more famous.
BBC,
isn't it? Yeah. And that prestige is big for them, isn't it? You know,
that's all they're trying. Yeah. All they're in this for,
and that's why we've got this interesting scenario with the TV because they want it.
Man, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if ITV make a play for it.
Well, somebody could.
Someone's going to go for it.
They've got a box office platform, haven't they? They've done. They have.
They've done a few. I think Eubank fights on ITV box office. I think. Yeah.
Yeah. But as for what we've got coming up, I'm just kind of waiting for things to get made for the new season now almost.
I'm hearing crazy whispers of Conor Benn and Chris Eubank.
Yeah, I saw that
crazy.
Today. I saw that today.
Where's this come from?
I like Eubank. I like the way he goes about his business. But I don't really want to see him box a welterweight. I didn't want to see him box Kell Brook for the same reason.
Yeah. Do you think Eubank will try and come down?
No. Conor will have to go up.
Conor have to go up.
Yeah, I think the lowest Eubank will go
is or something.
I think the lowest Eubank will go. The lowest he said he would go for Brook was 158, I think. So I think it's going to be all on his terms.
Jeez.
I don't think Tony Sims would want that.
No.
To be honest.
No. Sometimes though, I guess it's the numbers on the check that might look inviting. Yeah. And that's a Eubank. And
that'd be on DAZN, wouldn't it? Because Eubank's not a Sky fighter. He's a Wasserman fighter on loan to Sky sometimes, isn't he?
Eubank's a mercenary for hire.
Yeah.
Understandably so, like most boxers. He will go where the money is.
He's made a fantastic amount of money in his career.
He must have. He's been to every broadcast. He's literally gone everywhere. Everywhere. Which it'll be crazy. For me, it's almost like out of that sort of three, Eubank, Benn and Brook, this seems to be the most unfair fight. Like the one that made sense for me was Brook Benn because it was almost like a passing of the torch around the same weight class.
I had a lot of time for that.
Yeah, but Benn Eubank, I've seen Benn, he's big, but I've also seen Eubank and he's a lot bigger and fresher. Also, and as fresh as well. So yeah, if it happens, I'll get behind it. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I don't know. I'd say I don't really want to see it, but I know that if it gets made, I'll be all over it.
Come on,
because the build-up
and they'll get Eubank and Benn together, the seniors.
Yeah.
Oh, take my money.
No, it'll be good. It'll be good, definitely.
It'll be crazy. Andy, appreciate you coming down.
No problem,
man. Thank you very much. Cheers.